prisons are meant to be places of punishment and rehabilitation. However, history has shown that many prisons have been the sites of unimaginable horrors, where human beings were subjected to inhumane treatment, torture, and death. In this video, we will explore 9 of the most horrifying prisons in history, where prisoners were stripped of their humanity and forced to endure unimaginable suffering. 1. Devil's Island. Located off the coast of French Guiana, Devil's Island was one of the most notorious prisons in the world. The prison was established in 1852 and was used to house political prisoners, criminals, and other undesirables. Conditions on the island were harsh, and prisoners were subjected to forced labor in the island's jungle. Many prisoners died from disease, malnutrition, and brutality. The most famous prisoner of Devil's Island was Alfred Dreyfus, a French army officer who was wrongly accused of espionage in 1894. He was sent to Devil's Island in 1895 and spent 5 years there before being exonerated. During his time on the island, Dreyfus was subjected to solitary confinement, torture, and inhumane conditions. 2. Tuol Sleng Prison. During the Cambodian genocide of the 1970s, the Khmer Rouge established Tuol Sleng Prison, also known as S21. The prison was located in Phnom Penh and was used to house political prisoners and perceived enemies of the state. The conditions at Tuol Sleng were horrific, and prisoners were subjected to torture, starvation, and execution. Many prisoners were held in tiny cells where they were chained to the walls and given little food or water. They were subjected to brutal interrogation techniques, including electric shocks, waterboarding, and the use of pliers. Over 14,000 people were imprisoned at Tuol Sleng, and only 7 survived. 3. Robben Island. Robben Island is a small island off the coast of South Africa that served as a prison for political prisoners during apartheid. The prison was established in the 17th century and was used to house a variety of prisoners, including lepers, mentally ill patients, and political prisoners. During apartheid, Robben Island was used to house anti-apartheid activists, including Nelson Mandela, who spent 18 years of his 27-year sentence on the island. Conditions on the island were harsh, and prisoners were subjected to hard labor in a limestone quarry. They were also subjected to brutal treatment, including beatings, isolation, and humiliation. 4. Lesante Prison. Located in Paris, Lesante Prison is one of the oldest and most infamous prisons in France. The prison was established in 1867 and has housed many famous inmates, including Jacques Mesrine, a notorious bank robber and murderer. Conditions in Lesante were notoriously harsh, and prisoners were often subjected to beatings, overcrowding, and poor hygiene. Inmates were also known to be mistreated by guards and other inmates, and many suffered from mental illness and depression. 5. Hanoi Hilton. The Hanoi Hilton is the nickname given to Hoa Lo Prison, a prison in Hanoi, Vietnam, that was used to house American prisoners of war during the Vietnam War. The conditions at the prison were brutal, and prisoners were subjected to torture, starvation, and forced labor. Many prisoners were held in tiny cells where they were forced to live in squalor and were subjected to constant abuse. They were also used for propaganda purposes by the North Vietnamese government, who paraded them in front of the media and used them as bargaining chips in negotiations with the United States. 6. Karandiru Penitentiary. Karandiru Penitentiary was a prison in São Paulo, Brazil, that was in operation from 1956 to 2002. The prison was notoriously overcrowded, with over 8,000 inmates in a facility designed to hold only 3,000. The conditions in the prison were horrific, with prisoners living in squalor and subjected to violence and abuse. In 1992, a riot broke out in the prison, and the police were called to restore order. The police entered the prison and proceeded to shoot and kill over 100 prisoners. The incident was later referred to as the Karandiru Massacre and is considered one of the worst incidents of police brutality in Brazilian history. 7. Tadmor Prison. Tadmor Prison, also known as Palmyra Prison, is a prison in Syria that has a reputation for being one of the most brutal prisons in the world. The prison was built in the 1980s and was used to house political prisoners and other dissidents. Prisoners at Tadmor were subjected to brutal treatment, including torture, execution, and forced labor. In 1980, a riot broke out in the prison, and the Syrian government sent in troops to quell the uprising. The troops opened fire on the prisoners, killing over 1,000 people. 8. Attica Correctional Facility. Attica Correctional Facility is a maximum security prison in New York State that is known for the Attica Prison Riot, a 4-day uprising that occurred in 1971. The riot was sparked by poor living conditions, mistreatment by guards, and a lack of political and religious freedom for the inmates. The riot resulted in the deaths of 43 people, including 33 inmates and 10 guards. The incident brought attention to the inhumane conditions in American prisons and sparked a national conversation about prison reform. 9. Bastille. The Bastille was a prison in Paris that was famously stormed by French revolutionaries on July 14, 1789. The prison was a symbol of royal tyranny and was used to imprison political dissidents and other perceived enemies of the state. The conditions in the Bastille were notoriously harsh, and prisoners were often subjected to torture and other forms of abuse. The storming of the Bastille is considered a turning point in the French Revolution and is celebrated as Bastille Day in France. These 9 prisons represent some of the most horrifying and brutal institutions in the history of the world. They are a reminder of the importance of treating prisoners with dignity and respect, and of the need for continued efforts to reform and improve the criminal justice system. Thanks for watching. And don't forget to subscribe.